Flight 718. On June 30th, 1956, a mid-air collision occurred over the Grand Canyon when United Airlines DC-7 collided with the Trans-World Airlines Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation, killing all 128 people aboard both aircraft. The planes, which had taken off minutes apart from Los Angeles, were flying in uncontrolled airspace and were responsible for maintaining their own separation. The TWA flight had received clearance to fly above the clouds, which transferred the responsibility for avoiding other aircraft to the pilots. As both planes approached the Grand Canyon at the same altitude, they collided, with the United DC-7's wings striking the TWA Constellation's tail, causing it to crash into the canyon. The wreckage was not discovered until later in the day when two brothers working for Grand Canyon Airlines spotted the smoke from the crash site. The investigation concluded that the collision resulted from a combination of factors, including poor visibility, pilot error, and inadequate air traffic control. This disaster led to widespread public outcry, prompting for major reforms in air traffic control, including the establishment of the Federal Aviation Administration in 1958. The tragedy also highlighted the urgent need for modernized air traffic systems to prevent such accidents in the future. The Grand Canyon collision marked a pivotal moment in aviation history, underscoring the critical need for improved safety measures and air traffic control systems. In the wake of the disaster, the U.S. government took swift action to address the issues it revealed. While the tragedy initially caused public panic, it also led to significant reforms in the aviation industry. The Federal Aviation Act of 1958 was passed shortly afterward, creating the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, which was empowered with full control over U.S. airspace, including the regulation of military and civilian aircraft. This overhaul of air traffic control and the implementation of radar surveillance drastically improved the safety of air travel, reducing the likelihood of mid-air collisions. Additionally, the accident spurred the development of modern flight data monitoring systems, which became critical in preventing similar tragedies. The Grand Canyon crash remains a stark reminder of the dangers posed by outdated infrastructure and the importance of continuous advancements in aviation safety. Flight 173. United Airlines Flight 173, a scheduled flight from New York to Portland, Oregon, with a stop in Denver, crashed on December 28, 1978 near Portland, killing 10 people on board. The McDonnell Douglas DC-8 aircraft ran out of fuel while troubleshooting a landing gear malfunction. The crew, distracted by the gear issue, failed to monitor fuel levels, leading to the flameout of all 4 engines. The crew declared a mayday, but crashed into a wooded suburban area. The NTSB investigation revealed that the captain's preoccupation with the malfunction and the crew's failure to communicate the critical fuel situation were primary causes of the accident. This led to significant changes in aviation safety, including the development of crew resource management, which improved cockpit teamwork and decision-making. United Airlines implemented CRM training in 1981, making this accident a pivotal moment in aviation history. The aftermath of the crash had a lasting impact on both the aviation industry and the individuals involved. The NTSB's recommendation for crew resource management training sparked a major shift in pilot training, emphasizing communication, situational awareness, and teamwork to prevent similar accidents. United Airlines' implementation of CRM in 1981 set a precedent, and CRM is now a standard practice in aviation worldwide. Captain McBroom, held responsible for the crash, retired soon after the incident and struggled with guilt, health problems, and the loss of his career. Survivors of the crash, including a young passenger who lost her family, were awarded damages, and the crash became a case study for improving safety protocols in aviation. The incident highlighted the critical need for better decision-making in high-pressure situations and remains a significant lesson in aviation safety. Flight 232. United Airlines Flight 232, a DC-10 traveling from Denver to Chicago, suffered a catastrophic engine failure on July 19, 1989, due to a manufacturing defect in the tail mountain engine's fan disc. This led to a total loss of hydraulic control, leaving the crew unable to control the aircraft's flight surfaces. Despite these challenges, the crew, led by Captain Alfred Haynes and aided by passenger and experienced pilot Dennis Fitch, managed to perform a miraculous crash landing at Sioux Gateway Airport in Iowa. The aircraft lost all hydraulic fluid, causing a struggle to control altitude and alignment for landing. Attempts to deploy the landing gear manually were successful, though the crew still had limited control over the plane. Ultimately, the plane crash landed on a closed runway, bursting into flames and breaking apart. Out of the 296 people on board, 112 died, with many survivors escaping through ruptures in the fuselage. However, 35 people perished from smoke inhalation during the post-crash fire. The accident is often referred to as the impossible landing, due to the extraordinary efforts of the crew to save lives under extreme conditions. and it remains a notable example of effective crew resource management in aviation history. The aftermath of Flight 232 highlighted not only the remarkable actions of the flight crew, but also the extraordinary response from rescue teams. Despite the severity of the crash, all 4 crew members, including Captain Haynes, First Officer William Records, Flight Engineer Dudley Dvorak, and the passenger-turned-crew member Dennis Fitch, survived with injuries and were able to return to flying duty after recovery. Additionally, the crash underscored critical flaws in aviation safety protocols. The accident led to significant changes in airline safety procedures and aircraft design, especially concerning emergency systems and crew training for handling catastrophic failures. Flight 553. United Airlines Flight 553, a domestic flight from Washington to Omaha, crashed on December 8, 1972, while approaching Chicago Midway International Airport. The Boeing 737-222 named City of Lincoln crashed into a residential neighborhood, destroying 5 houses and killing 43 of the 61 people aboard, as well as 2 on the ground. Notably, among the victims were Illinois Congressman George W. Collins, CBS News correspondent Michelle Clark, and Dorothy Hunt, wife of Watergate figure E. Howard Hunt. The crash was the first fatal accident involving the Boeing 737, which had entered service in 1968. The accident occurred during a non-precision approach to Midway, where the aircraft descended too quickly after the captain, in an effort to correct altitude, extended the spoilers. This led to a stall when the plane leveled off at too low an airspeed, and a crash ensued. The crew's failure to manage the approach properly, including a lack of coordination and failure to retract spoilers, contributed to the incident. In the aftermath, conspiracy theories emerged, especially due to Dorothy Hunt's presence on the flight, with rumors alleging that the crash was linked to Watergate and sabotage. However, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the crash resulted from pilot error, citing the captain's failure to exercise proper flight management. Despite the theories, no evidence of sabotage was found. The accident sparked concerns about cockpit discipline and crew coordination during non-precision approaches, leading to increased focus on improving aviation safety protocols. The investigation into the crash also revealed significant issues with the aircraft's equipment. Notably, the flight data recorder was not functioning due to a mechanical failure, which hindered the immediate analysis of the flight's performance. However, the automated terminal radar services system at nearby O'Hare International Airport provided valuable radar data. When combined with the working cockpit voice recorder, helped to reconstruct the final moments of the flight. Flight 389. United Airlines Flight 389, a scheduled flight from LaGuardia Airport to O'Hare International Airport, crashed into Lake Michigan on August 16, 1965, killing all 30 people aboard. The Boeing 727 was descending from 35,000 feet when it crashed, with no indication of problems prior to impact. The probable cause was believed to be the pilots misreading their altimeters by 10,000 feet, continuing an uninterrupted descent. Investigators noted that the 3-pointer altimeter design was particularly prone to misreading, leading to the crew's confusion. Despite an extensive search, no survivors were found. The flight data recorder was never recovered, making the investigation more challenging. This crash marked the first fatal accident involving a Boeing 727, which had been in service for only 2.5 months. The investigation into the crash of Flight 389 was hampered by the inability to recover key evidence, particularly the flight data recorder, which was never found despite efforts to retrieve it from the wreckage in the muddy waters of Lake Michigan. However, the investigation did highlight that the pilots likely misinterpreted their altitude due to the faulty altimeter readings. It was later determined that the 3-pointer altimeter, which was in use on the aircraft, was more prone to errors and took longer for pilots to read compared to other altimeter designs. A study conducted by the Naval Research Laboratory in 1965 had already identified this issue, revealing that pilots misread the 3-pointer design nearly 8 times more often than other types, which may have contributed to the confusion in this case. The crash of Flight 389 not only led to a re-evaluation of the altimeter design, but also served as a wake-up call for improving cockpit training and flight crew awareness regarding altitude readings and instrumentation. Flight 93. United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757-200, was hijacked by 4 al-Qaeda terrorists on September 11, 2001, as part of the coordinated attacks that day. The hijackers intended to crash the plane into a U.S. government target, likely the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. However, after learning about the previous hijackings, the passengers aboard Flight 93 heroically fought back. This resistance forced the terrorists to crash the plane in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, preventing it from reaching its target but killing all 44 people aboard, including the 4 hijackers. The hijackers, led by Ziad Jarrah, took control of the flight about 46 minutes after departure. During this time, The passengers learned about the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. As the hijackers diverted the plane back towards Washington, the passengers attempted to retake control of the aircraft. Tragically, the plane crashed at high speeds into the ground in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, with a violent explosion. This was the fourth and final flight hijacked that day, and unlike the others, it did not reach its intended target. The crash was witnessed by local residents and was reported shortly after. In the aftermath, a memorial was created at the crash site to honor the passengers' bravery. Flight 93's hijackers had boarded the plane after a series of phone calls and checked in luggage that raised no alarms at airport security. The passengers and crew had only a limited amount of time to react after learning of the earlier attacks. The fight for control of the plane became a key moment in the day's tragic events, with the crew and passengers doing everything they could to prevent further catastrophe. In addition to the passengers' courageous actions, the events aboard Flight 93 highlighted the critical role of communication during the attacks. Many passengers were able to make phone calls to loved ones, which allowed them to share their knowledge of the hijacking and the unfolding tragedy. Through these calls, they learned about the destruction of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Flight 227. United Airlines Flight 227, a Boeing 727, crashed short of the runway while attempting to land at Salt Lake City International Airport on November 11, 1965, resulting in 43 fatalities. The aircraft, under the control of Captain Gail C. Kamier, was descending at an excessive rate of 2,300 feet per minute, 3 times the recommended rate. Despite attempts by the first officer to add thrust, the captain delayed this action, leading to a crash just 335 feet from the runway. The crash caused a severe fire that led to the deaths of all passengers and crew aboard. The investigation blamed the crash on the captain's poor judgment, his failure to descend at a safe rate, and his refusal to allow the first officer to adjust thrust. Additionally, the captain's inadequate training and history of failed flight tests contributed to the tragedy. In addition to the captain's poor judgment and inadequate training, the investigation also highlighted critical issues with communication and decision-making within the cockpit. The first officer's attempt to correct the situation by increasing thrust was dismissed by the captain, which significantly delayed the aircraft's response to the dangerously high descent rate. This failure to effectively communicate and make timely decisions under pressure underscores the importance of clear and assertive communication within the flight crew. The accident led to changes in cockpit training protocols, emphasizing the need for better collaboration and decision-making in high-stress situations. This tragedy also served as a reminder of the importance of thorough pilot proficiency checks and the need for ongoing evaluation of pilots' ability to handle complex flight scenarios, especially when operating under difficult conditions. Flight 175. On September 11, 2001, United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767-200, was hijacked by 5 al-Qaeda terrorists en route from Boston to Los Angeles. The hijackers, led by Marwa al-Shehi, took control of the plane at 8:42 and crashed it into the South Tower of the World Trade Center at 9:03, killing all 56 passengers, including 5 hijackers, 9 crew members, and more than 600 people in the tower. The crash was captured live on television, as it was the second of the 4 attacks that day. The impact caused significant structural damage, leading to the tower's collapse at 9:59, killing everyone inside. The hijackers, trained in Afghanistan and Pakistan, had boarded the flight in Boston after passing through security with no red flags. Once in control of the plane, they deviated from their flight path, and air traffic controllers struggled to regain contact. Flight 175 was part of a coordinated attack with Flight 11, which had hit the North Tower 17 minutes earlier. After the crash, the South Tower collapsed 56 minutes later due to the fires caused by the jet fuel. The flight's crash, along with the subsequent collapse of the South Tower, caused significant loss of life. Many passengers' remains were never recovered. The event marked the beginning of a long process of recovery and memorialization, with the victims' names inscribed at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum. The financial aftermath saw billions paid to the victims' families through the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. The tragic events surrounding United Airlines Flight 175 were part of the broader September 11th attacks, which also targeted the Pentagon and led to the crash of United Airlines Flight 93 in Pennsylvania. The coordinated attacks were meticulously planned by al-Qaeda, with the aim of striking symbolic targets in the US and causing widespread devastation. The loss of life and destruction sparked a global response, leading to a war on terror and major changes in US security policies, especially in aviation. Flight 266. On January 18, 1969, United Airlines Flight 266, a scheduled passenger flight from Los Angeles to Milwaukee, crashed in Santa Monica Bay 4 minutes after takeoff, killing all 38 people on board. The Boeing 727 had a non-functional number 3 generator, which led to the masking of warning lights, and shortly after takeoff, the crew reported a fire warning on engine number 1 and shut it off. However, both generators failed, causing the loss of electrical power and flight instruments. The pilots became disoriented and lost control of the aircraft, crashing it into the ocean. Witnesses initially speculated an explosion, but no fire damage was found. The investigation by the NTSB could not determine why the generators failed or why the backup electrical systems wasn't activated, although it was suggested that a series of errors or malfunctions contributed. The crash prompted the FAA to require aircraft to carry backup instrumentation independent of the main generators. The cause was determined to be the loss of altitude orientation due to the electrical failure during a night instrument departure. This crash followed another similar accident just days earlier, highlighting ongoing safety concerns at the time. In addition to the immediate safety improvements following the crash, the investigation into Flight 266 led to important changes in aviation protocols. Specifically, the accident highlighted the critical need for aircraft to have reliable backup power systems for essential flight instruments. Prior to the crash, backup systems were not mandated, and many aircraft, including the Boeing 727, lacked battery-powered instrumentation independent of the main electrical system. As a result of the findings, the FAA instituted regulations requiring all transport category aircraft to be equipped with independent battery-powered backup systems for key flight instruments, greatly improving flight safety and ensuring pilots would not become disoriented during similar emergency situations in the future. The tragedy of Flight 266 also reinforced the importance of thorough maintenance and timely repairs, as the plane had experienced issues with its electrical generators prior to the flight. This accident, along with other similar incidents, contributed to the significant advancements in aircraft design and operational procedures. Flight 4819. Delta Airlines Flight 4819, operated by Endeavour Air, was just a regular trip from Minneapolis to Toronto on February 17, 2025. The plane, a Bombardier CRJ-900LR, that had been flying for 16 years and carried 76 passengers and 4 crew members. It was supposed to be a regular flight, connecting people for business and travel between these two busy cities. But things took a terrifying turn when the plane tried to land at Toronto Pearson Airport. As it touched down, it hit the runway hard, bounced, and suddenly tilted to the right. Within seconds, the aircraft flipped upside down, with its right wing and tail breaking off on impact. A fire broke out, and the plane skidded to a stop on its roof just off the runway. Miraculously, everyone on board survived, but 21 passengers were hurt, with injuries like back sprains, head cuts, and breathing in fuel fumes. 3 of them were flown to a hospital, but thankfully, none of the injuries were life-threatening. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada quickly launched an investigation, working alongside U.S. aviation officials. They recovered the black boxes, devices that record flight data and cockpit conversations, to figure out what went wrong. Experts suggest strong winds or mechanical issues could have caused the plane to flip. Physicist Aaron Bansal explained that when a plane's balance is thrown off, it can start spinning out of control, which might explain what happened. Delta stepped in, offering each passenger $30,000 in compensation while making it clear they could still take legal action if they wanted. Delta's CEO Ed Bastian praised the pilots for their quick response and reassured the public that safety remains their top priority. Lines Flight 1288. Flight 1288, operated by Delta Airlines, was set to take off from Pensacola, Florida to Atlanta, Georgia on July 6, 1996. The McDonnell Douglas MD-88 had logged over 22,000 flight hours throughout its years of service. As the plane started speeding down runway 17 in Pensacola, disaster struck at around 46 miles per hour. The left engine suffered a major failure, causing metal fragments to shoot out of the engine and tear through the rear part of the cabin. Tragically, 2 passengers, a mother and her son sitting in row 37, lost their lives. 7 others were injured, including 2 seriously. The pilots immediately aborted takeoff and managed to bring the plane to a stop on the runway. The National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation and found that the failure was caused by a hidden crack in the front part of the engine's compressor fan. This tiny flaw had formed during manufacturing when Volvo was drilling the part for Pratt & Whitney. Over time, the crack grew, but it was never caught during routine maintenance checks, including Delta's inspections. In the end, the NTSB determined that the accident happened because of this unnoted defect and a lack of better inspection methods that could have caught the problem before it turned deadly. Flight 1086. Making its usual journey, Delta Airlines Flight 1086 was set to fly from Atlanta, Georgia to LaGuardia Airport in New York City on March 5, 2015. The McDonnell Douglas MD-88, which had been flying since 1987, carried 127 passengers and 5 crew members. As the plane came in to land at LaGuardia, the weather was rough, snowy, and foggy. The pilots touched down on runway 13, but almost immediately, things went wrong. The plane veered left, skidded across the snowy airfield, and crashed into the airport's perimeter fence. It finally stopped with its nose hanging over the berm above Flushing Bay. It was a terrifying moment, but thankfully, everyone on board survived. However, 29 people had minor injuries, and the plane was so damaged that it was scrapped. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated the accident and found that the captain lost control of the plane because he used too much reverse thrust while landing. Normally, the engine's reverse thrust helps slow the plane down, but using too much can make the rudder less effective, especially on a slick, snow-covered runway. Delta's guidelines advise keeping the reverse thrust at 1.3, but data showed the captain pushed it to 1.9 just 6 seconds after landing. That was enough to make the plane slide off the runway. Flight 1111. Delta Airlines Flight 1111 was a passenger flight on June 23, 2023, traveling from Los Angeles to San Antonio. The flight used an Airbus A319-100 and was meant to transport both business and leisure travelers between the two cities. When the plane landed in San Antonio, it was taxiing to the gate with one engine still running. Tragically, a ground crew member, 27-year-old David Renner, was pulled into the running engine and died instantly. Renner worked for Unify Aviation, a company that provides ground services for Delta Airlines. The Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office later ruled his death as a suicide caused by blunt and sharp force injuries. After the incident, the National Transportation Safety Board reviewed the case but found no safety issues with the plane or the airport. Because of this, they decided not to launch a full investigation. Unify Aviation expressed deep sadness over the loss of their employee. They also stated that their investigation found the tragedy was not linked to any of their safety procedures or work policies. Flight 982. On January 20, 2024, Delta Airlines Flight 982 was scheduled for a trip from Atlanta, Georgia to Bogota, Colombia. The Boeing 757-200, flying since 1992, carried 172 passengers and 6 crew members. Just as the plane was about to take off, something unexpected happened. The nose wheel suddenly detached and rolled away, forcing the pilots to cancel the takeoff. Another pilot in a nearby plane noticed what had happened and radioed the crew saying, "One of your nose tires just came off. It just rolled off the runway behind you." Thankfully, no one was hurt. Everyone on board was safely taken back to the terminal, and Delta arranged a different plane to complete the trip later that day. The Federal Aviation Administration started an investigation to figure out what went wrong. Since the Boeing 757 was 32 years old, experts pointed out the importance of regular maintenance, especially for critical parts like landing gear. Boeing, which stopped making the 757 in 2004, didn't comment and left it to Delta since they handled the maintenance on their planes. Delta later apologized to passengers for the delay and assured them that safety is always their top priority. The aircraft was repaired and put back into service the next day. Flight 191. Flight 191, operated by Delta Airlines, was en route from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Los Angeles, California, making a planned stop in Dallas, Texas. On August 2, 1985, the flight was being operated by a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar aircraft, carrying both business and vacation travelers. As the plane got closer to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, the weather started to get worse due to nearby thunderstorms. While trying to land on runway 17L, the aircraft suddenly hit a powerful downdraft called a microburst, a strong burst of wind that pushes planes down unexpectedly. This caused the plane to lose altitude very quickly. The pilots tried to recover, but the plane crashed about a mile short of the runway. It first hit a car on a nearby highway, killing the driver, then slammed into 2 water tanks before breaking apart. Out of the 163 people on board, 136 lost their lives, while 27 survived, some with serious injuries. Sadly, 1 person on the ground also died. After investigating, the National Transportation Safety Board determined the crash happened because the pilots didn't have the training or equipment to detect and avoid microbursts. At that time, neither the airport nor the plane had advanced technology to warn of such dangerous wind patterns. In response, the Federal Aviation Administration required all commercial planes to have wind shear detection systems and install Doppler radar at major airports to help predict dangerous weather conditions in real time. Flight 1141. Delta Airlines Flight 1141 was a domestic flight from Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas to Salt Lake City, Utah. On August 31, 1988, the flight was operated by a Boeing 727-200, which had been in service since 1973. The plane was carrying passengers traveling for both business and leisure. As the plane took off from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, it failed to gain enough lift and crashed. Investigators later found that the pilots had forgotten to extend the wing flaps and slats, parts of the wing that helped the plane take off properly. Without them, the aircraft couldn't generate enough lift and stalled just after leaving the ground. The right wingtip hit the ground, the plane struck a landing system antenna and then it crashed and caught fire. Out of 108 people on board, 14 lost their lives, including 2 crew members and 12 passengers. Another 76 people were injured. The aircraft was completely destroyed. The National Transportation Safety Board investigation found that the pilots were distracted before takeoff, chatting about non-work-related topics instead of focusing on their checklist. This broke the sterile cockpit rule, which requires crews to avoid unnecessary conversations during critical flight phases. As a result, they missed the crucial step of setting the flaps and slats for takeoff. The warning system, which should have alerted them to this mistake, didn't go off, possibly due to a malfunction or maintenance issue. In the end, the NTSB blamed the crash on the crew's failure to properly prepare for takeoff, along with poor discipline in the cockpit and flaws in Delta's operational procedures. Flight 954. On December 20th, 1972, Delta Airlines Flight 954 was flying from Tampa, Florida to Chicago O'Hare. The plane, a Convair CV-880, was being flown by Captain Robert E. McDowell, First Officer Harry D. Greenberg, and Flight Engineer Claude F. Fletcher, along with 4 flight attendants. The flight took off from Tampa and landed at O'Hare. When they arrived, the crew was told that runways 14L and 14R were being used for departures, but no one mentioned that runway 27L was also in use. As Flight 954 taxied toward the terminal, thick fog made it hard to see, with visibility down to just a quarter mile. The first officer radioed ground control, saying they were inside the bridge and waiting for their gate. But the ground controller misunderstood and thought that the plane was still north of the bridge. The controller then told them to wait in the 32 box, which referred to the 32R run-up pad. Thinking the controller knew their exact location, the crew taxied toward the 32L run-up pad, crossing active runway 27L. At that moment, North Central Airlines Flight 575, a DC-9, was taking off. Flight 575's pilots spotted a Delta CV-880 crossing just 1,600 feet ahead. They tried to lift off early, but couldn't. The DC-9's landing gear hit the Delta plane, sending it skidding off the runway and into flames. 10 passengers died, and 15 were injured. Miraculously, all 93 on the Delta flight survived, with only 2 minor injuries. The NTSB investigated and found that miscommunication between the Delta crew and ground control was the main reason for the accident. The dense fog only made things worse, reducing visibility. Flight 723. On July 31, 1973, Delta Airlines Flight 723 was flying within the U.S. using a McDonnell Douglas DC-931. The flight started in Burlington, Vermont, stopped in Manchester, New Hampshire, and was supposed to end in Boston, Massachusetts. The Manchester stop was added at the last minute to pick up passengers from an earlier flight that was cancelled due to bad weather in Boston. That morning, thick fog covered Boston, making it hard to see. Clouds were low at 400 feet and visibility was just half a mile. As Flight 723 approached Logan Airport's runway 4R, air traffic control was busy handling another possible collision and delayed the landing clearance. By the time they gave it, the plane was too fast and too high, making for a shaky approach. The aircraft drifted off course, dropped too low, and at 11:08 a.m., crashed into a seawall 3,000 feet short of the runway. The impact destroyed the plane, killing 87 of the 89 people on board. 2 people initially survived but were badly injured. One died shortly after reaching the hospital, and the other passed away months later. The NTSB found that the pilots likely misused the flight director, accidentally setting it to go-around mode instead of approach. Distracted by the faulty system and failing to call out their altitude, they didn't realize they were too low. The crash happened because the crew lost awareness during an unstable approach in bad weather. Confusing air traffic control instructions and the malfunctioning flight detector also played a role.